Welcome to my second video on King's Raid World Boss number 3, Xanadus. Now, Xanadus is actually the world boss that I have the most trouble with. I get the lowest score on her compared to the other two bosses, at least right now. But still, I have improved a lot since I made my previous video on Xanadus. In my previous video, I scored less than 200 billion, but in this video, I'm going to score 595 billion, almost 600 billion damage to Xanadus, so I am improving. Incidentally, my highest score for any world boss is currently 840 billion on world boss number 1. I hope to be able to do 1 trillion in damage to a world boss pretty soon. So these are the characters I'm using for Xanadus. First one is Syria. Syria's S3 is useful against Xanadus, especially when she does her Nightmare of the Abyss skill. And I had a big breakthrough when I decided to use her S3 Light perk rather than her S3 Dark perk. Her S3 Light perk causes her S3 to also dispel the positive effects that Xanadus stacks up. And I find that actually that really helps a lot to increase my damage to her. Because Xanadus has a way of isolating your main tank, I have Seria sort of being used as a backup tank in a way. That's why I have mostly given her gear with a lot of defensive stats, and I am also not using her Tier 5 Dark perk, and the reason for that is, although her Tier 5 Dark perk would make all of her hits critical hits, it also makes it impossible for her to block, and it increases the amount of damage that she takes by 25%. So, since I'm not really using her so much for DPS, I don't really mind if not all her hits are critical hits. I'd rather have her survive. For my main tank, I am using Mora. Now, one thing I noticed about Morra is Xanadus will stack up certain positive effects, especially when she is doing her Nightmare of the Abyss. She stacks this yellow shield when she does her Nightmare of the Abyss, and you want her to stack this shield as little as possible because it will stay there for the rest of the battle. Once she adds it, it cannot be removed, and it will reduce the amount of damage that Xanadus can take. When I don't use Mora, I notice that Xanadus is able to add to these yellow shield stacks every single time she does Nightmare of the Abyss. But when I do use Mora, she is really only able to add these stacks the very first time she does Nightmare of the Abyss. Now, I'm not sure if that's solely because of Mora. It might also be because of some of the other characters I'm using. If you happen to know, please tell me. I do know that it's at least partly because of Mora, because like I said, when I don't use Mora, these shields will continue to stack every single time she does Nightmare of the Abyss. Now, in the run that I am about to show you, I was able to actually prevent her from stacking these yellow shields at all. I'm also using Shia, and Shia is a healer that is pretty useful in world boss battles, and she now has a 5-star unique weapon. She is actually my only character that has a 5-star unique weapon. I was just recently able to upgrade her unique weapon to a 5-star, and I actually got fairly lucky because the first time I tried upgrading from a 4-star to a 5-star, and I used a 2-star unique weapon, I immediately was able to get it upgraded to a 5-star. In fact, I've actually gotten pretty lucky with Shia's unique weapon altogether. I think I've only used about 10 unique weapons, and if I had upgraded her unique weapons all the way to a 5-star, doing it the guaranteed way, it would have cost me 32 unique weapons. I don't always get that lucky, but with Shia, I have actually gotten pretty lucky with upgrading her unique weapons. I'm also using Rehartna. I really like Rehartna. She is a healer that is also a buffer. I actually like her more than May, and I really like May a lot. Rehartna is a relatively low investment character, and one thing I like about her is her S3 will actually reduce the cooldown times of the other characters. Not as much as, say, Audi, but still, she does actually reduce the other characters' cooldowns. For my main DPS in this battle, I'm using Laudia, and I'm also using the Otherworldly Sword, which is one of the new artifacts, one of the Shakma artifacts, and I actually find that a 0-star Otherworldly Sword is actually better than a 2-star Book of Mad, and unlike the Book of Mad, it actually doesn't drain the character's mana. It does, however, drain the character's hit points. In this battle, however, it doesn't make a difference because I have enough healers that it's not really a problem. The other thing about the Otherworldly Sword is its effects do actually dispel, so if you're facing enemies that can dispel, such as World Boss number 2, Protanius, it's not really that useful, but because Xanadus does not actually dispel, it is actually pretty useful. I'm also using Annette. Annette is a mechanic character, but she has an S2 that actually heals all the other characters, and it also removes all negative effects and increases their CC resist. And a lot of people say that with a 5-star unique weapon, Shia, you don't need to use Annette, but I find that Annette is still pretty useful. Maybe if I got more skilled at using Shia manually, I could do without Annette. But right now, I still find that Annette is quite useful. I also like to use the Sled artifact with Annette, and what the Sled artifact does is when Annette is hit with CC effects, it actually reduces her cooldown time, which is pretty useful because that means that her S2 can be used when you need it, especially like when you get a CC effect. I am also using Yuria instead of Krisha, and while Krisha is very useful in this battle, I actually find that Yuria is actually better, and Krisha pretty much requires that you use her manually, just as Syria does, but Yuria, you don't really need to use her manually, so it makes things easier. I'm also using the Infernal Greatsword artifact with Urea, and if anybody knows of an artifact that would actually be better in this situation, let me know. But it seems to be pretty good. And finally, I'm using Lavril to augment my DPS's power. So, now on with the battle. Now, it does say that I am using Shia and Rehartna and Laudia on auto, but actually I'm doing some manual overrides as well, so it's not totally auto. And I'm using Syria totally manually. That's because I want to get the timing of her S3 exactly right. And like I said earlier, with this combination of characters, the first time Xanadus does her Nightmare of the Abyss is very important because she won't be able to add up any more of those golden shields or yellow shields that I talked about earlier in this video. So here I go. I'm going to use Syria's S3, then I'm using Syria's Soul Weapon, and then I'm using Syria's S1, and it looks like S2. And this time around, as you notice, Xanadus doesn't actually stack up any of those golden shields. Now, I've noticed that it might be okay for Xanadus to stack up, say, 10 of those golden shields, but if you have her stacking up 100, that can really hold you back because they will greatly reduce the amount of damage that Xanadus will take. So, and here she's going to do the Nightmare of the Abyss again, and this time I don't have to worry about her stacking up those golden shields because she doesn't do it the second time around or any time after the first time. So, since I was able to prevent her from stacking up any of those golden shields the first time, I'm able to do a lot more damage than I otherwise would have been able to do. And yeah, so if she stacks up more than 100 of those golden shields, it can be a pretty big problem. But I'll usually restart the battle if that happens. But if she doesn't stack up any golden shields, like in this particular battle, then I know I'm doing pretty well. And as we come up to the 1.5 minute marks, you can see that I have done about 270 billion in damage, and I was aiming to do an absolute minimum of 400 billion. So that's a pretty good number to have at that point. And I am now able to have pretty much all of my characters survive for the entire time in this battle. That wasn't always the case, but partly by making Syria more defensive, I am able to accomplish this, and I definitely do find that having a 5-star unique weapon for Shia does help, even though I am not totally using her manually. And I also have her unique treasure equipped, her S3 unique treasure, and so that one will boost the amount of critical damage that all of our characters have. So I'm also, as you can see, manually focusing especially on Laudia's S3 and to a lesser extent her S2, but I'm also, I'm doing some manual overrides, but I'm allowing that to be on auto. Another thing that definitely helps is the 4-star Abysmal Crown I now have. It took me a while to get the 4-star Abysmal Crown. I didn't get nearly as lucky on upgrading the Abysmal Crown as I did on upgrading Shia's unique weapon. It took me 14 crowns to get to a 4-star Abysmal Crown. If I did it the guaranteed way, it would have taken me 16. So I still did a little bit better than I would have done if I upgraded it the guaranteed way. And there we go. I got to 595 billion on this world boss, almost 600 billion. Thanks very much to my Patreon producer, Lena, aka Lollipop, and my Patreon associate producer, Jammy Joy. If you like this video, give it a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel, click the bell icon for notifications, and select all notifications. It really helps me out when you select all notifications. You can also catch me on Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter at Zorkbid123.